Welcome to this week's edition of World Crisis Radio. This is Webster Tarpley speaking from Washington, D.C. Well, as we're recording our program here in the afternoon of Friday, August 3rd, about 1 o'clock Eastern Time in the afternoon, it's scoundrel time at the United Nations, and the imperialists have trotted out their arm-twisting capabilities, their blackmail, their garrote and stick approach to engineer a vote, this time of the United Nations General Assembly, not the Security Council, but the non-binding and often ignored General Assembly because of the inability of the imperialists to get anything rammed through the Security Council because of the continuing opposition, which we praise, of Russia and China, with some other countries providing some flanking assistance. The imperialists have gone to the United Nations General Assembly with a resolution condemning the Security Council and condemning the Syrian regime, the Syrian government of the Ba'ath Party and President Assad. They're being condemned, and they're being told that they have to treat the death squads with kid gloves, that the Al-Qaeda killers and death squads deployed by NATO cannot be subjected to heavy weapons, as we're told. In the meantime, the death squads themselves have got some fairly heavy or capable weapons. Hope to have the vote count. The vote is actually going on now, but it's going to be a lopsided vote in favor of the imperialist resolution, and you can see why a lot of countries have something to lose and really nothing to gain on this. This comes in the wake of the resignation of Kofi Annan, right? The veteran, discredited imperialist operative, the wheel horse of imperialism in the 90s and into the current, the past decade, the aughties and now into the teens. Kofi Annan quit yesterday, saying that his six-point plan was not getting enough cooperation. And, however, he singled out name-calling in the Security Council. Now, I would say that in a general way, the parabola of Kofi Annan that we're seeing is what was planned in. It was more or less what the imperialists wanted from him. He was a smokescreen, and during the time that he was doing this diplomatic routine, the massive reinforcement of the death squads took place, and the imperialists attempted their July 18th Operation Damascus Volcano, their attempted convergence of crises against Syria, which has been stymied for the moment, but of course the imperialists don't give up. So Kofi, I think, was programmed to fail and then programmed to quit. But it is interesting, the point that he makes in departing. He says, name-calling in the Security Council. Well, honestly, who is the potty-mouthed, foul-mouthed champion of the Security Council? It's Ambassador Susan Rice of the United States, right? The bubbling cauldron of hatred. She's been the one calling Russia and China despicable and so forth. You can see I've published articles where I cataloged the various choice adjectives used by Susan Rice and by her boss, Hillary Clinton. Remember that Susan Rice has got to be an even bigger warmonger than Hillary, because Susan Rice wants to take the place of Hillary, and she's got to match every epithet, every slur, every insult spewed by Hillary. Susan Rice has got to go one better. So it seems to me interesting that Kofi, in all of his aggravation and disappointment, whatever, he focuses on name-calling in the Security Council. You might as well say he should have said Ambassador Susan Rice is a hooligan who should be banned. Right? She should be just excluded from the United Nations. Now, that leaves us with the continuing fighting in Syria. What do we know about this? Well, One is the video that we've got, a rebel death squad, the classic thing that we've been talking about for many months, going back to October, November of last year, right? And that interview that I did for Russia Today from Damascus, the one with the fountain in the background. This is now a case study of precisely that. These are death squads. They're deployed by NATO. They're armed by the CIA. They're paid for by Saudi Arabia and the other reactionary Gulf states. And they kill people. And this is an example. You can find the link to the video at Webster G. Tarpley Twitter feed. Webster G. Tarpley Twitter feed will lead you to, it's a site called Extremus Spiritus, I think. But you can find it elsewhere, too. You got to get the non-censored, non-blurred version to see the enormity of what these death squads do. They simply get a bunch of prisoners and machine gun them to death, right? 15 or so prisoners that they've taken. They beat them first, they torture them, and then they execute them. And these are the heroes of democracy. The victims of this exercise are reported to be members of the Berry clan, thought to be an important family, and actually a clan, an extended family with many, many thousands of members, according to some accounts, in northern Syria. Naturally, we're wondering, right? People know a politician in the region, Nabi Berri of the Islamic Amal in Lebanon. One wonders if there's any connection, right? Given the name being the same, but there may be none. Maybe somebody wants to enlighten me about that. But this is near Aleppo, so this is a complete massacre. Naturally, the heroes of democracy are not demoted from their exalted status because of this massacre. It's largely ignored by the Western media, although it did get on, I think, CNN at one point. But, of course, we're told, well, it started as a peaceful protest. It never was a peaceful protest. This is the big lie. In March of April of 2011, what started in Syria was an armed rebellion by these infiltrated death squads. And I was able to research that with the help of others at Banias. It was about the Banias massacre that took place very early on. Similarly, in Homs, were reports about, guns being present at the very first sort of pro-democracy, pro-assassination demonstration. So this complete fraud. We're also focusing on Aleppo, continuous fighting there. Damascus seems to have been pretty much mopped up in terms of the death squads taking over Damascus. There is a report that 3 additional warships, we don't know whether this is part of the 11 Russian warships or an additional 3 Russian warships with 360 Russian Marines on board sent to Tartus. That's from a source, but then officially denied by the ministry. So you wonder what to say. We've also got an unfortunate episode. Hamas of the Gaza Palestinians, the Hamas people and the Palestinian Islamic Jihad have apparently increased their commitment against the Assad government and against the Ba'ath Party. This is shameful. This is self-destructive. This is not going to help these people. This makes the Israelis stronger, to put it in crude terms. Hamas and the Palestinian Islamic Jihad are absolutely playing into the hands of the Israelis and the U.S., and one wonders, how much money are they getting from Saudi Arabia to do this? How much are they getting from Turkey? But above all, from those people in Qatar and Kuwait and the Emirates and so forth. So shame on Hamas, shame on Palestinian Islamic Jihad, and kudos to the Popular Front for the Liberation of Palestine General Command, who seem to have to resist it. Welcome back to World Crisis Radio. We're naturally continuing to get threats from the imperialists. If anything moves in terms of the Syrian chemical weapons, then that will be immediate casus belli, the cover story needed for an invasion, a bombing, and an invasion. We continue to deplore the role of Turkey. We've got Turkey complaining again in the past week about the activity of the Kurds. Well, what were you thinking? What did you think would happen? This policy of adventurism and meddling by Turkey has stirred up a hornet's nest in the Kurdish populations. Some reports say that the Kurdish areas of northern Syria have become largely autonomous. They will undoubtedly begin to act on the Kurdish areas of Turkey. This is simply a fact, and if Turkey wants to preserve its territorial integrity, the word once again is back off. Stop this policy. Ataturk correctly pointed out that Turkey can survive as a national state in Anatolia, but the idea of recreating an empire or a sphere of influence is incalculable folly. And as all sorts of people, General Michel Aoun of Lebanon and others have all pointed out, Turkey is the last country that ought to be engaging in this kind of meddling, because it does so at tremendous peril for its internal situation. Now, let's, however, step back and think about a strategic approach to this, right? The question now is, the Arab Spring, ending in ashes and bitter recriminations, clearly in all the places it's been tried, will the Arab Spring, nevertheless, bring about the Saudi fall? The Saudi fall, in this case, means the fall of the House of Saud, this monstrous, feudal, reactionary monarchy, if we can call it that, which has been ruling the Arabian Peninsula and its various satellites, right? Qatar, Bahrain, Oman, the United Arab Emirates, Kuwait, and we're talking royal families here. The House of Saud of Saudi Arabia, right? You know their history. They started off with Lawrence of Arabia back during World War I. They beat out the Hashemites, the people who are now ruling Jordan. So the House of Saud got control of Saudi Arabia. They're the guardians of the holy places, but their internal policies are simply strangling people, in particular strangling the Shiite population of that eastern province. And we have been following with great interest the upsurge in Qatif, Qatif, and other areas there in the eastern province. This is about the Shiite cleric Nimri, or Nemri, N-E-M-R, Nimr, that has been, these guys have been arrested by the Saudi authorities, being mistreated, and so forth. So here we have a real regime of oppression and the removal of the proceeds of the oil, which is, a lot of the oil is located there, but the people in that area are denied any fair share of what their own provinces produce. So that's the House of Saud, and we'll be talking about them in detail. In Bahrain, of course, it's the Khalifa family, and the news today is that there's an upsurge. The upsurge in Bahrain continues. Now, this has been going on since last March, and you'll remember when these were actual pro-democracy, anti-monarchy, anti-totalitarian demonstrations in Bahrain, they were immediately crushed by the security forces of Bahrain, but also by the Saudi army, or by the group of mercenaries, many of them foreigners, who call themselves the Saudi army, because, of course, the princes of Saudi Arabia don't like to do any work. Well, maybe Hegel's dialectic of slave and master will go to work on them. I think that's what's already happening. Take a look at that in the phenomenology of mind. The basic idea is that the slave does all the work, and the initiative ultimately passes to the slave. We can use that as a general template for what happens to oppressors. So in this case, today, there's an attempt by demonstrators to block one of the main roads in Bahrain, and the security forces are moving against them. Now, this is the Khalifa family, and we know that the Khalifa emirs have been hospitable to the U.S. fleet, which has one of its main bases there. The U.S., I guess it's the Fifth Fleet, active in the Gulf and in the Arabian Sea. That's got a base in Bahrain. So you're not hearing anything from Amy Goodman in Democracy Now! About Bahrain, at least not on the same scale that she's pushing Syria. And this, of course, applies to all these other places. Then we've got Qatar, or Qatar, the home of Al Jazeera. Isn't that wonderful? The wonderful champions of democracy. And here we have the Thani family. This is, of course, the Qatar Airways hub. This is Al Jazeera, extremely active right there. They're leading the charge. They are the main people out there in the Arab League condemning Syria and so forth. Well, remember, there was an attempted coup in Qatar back in the middle of April, 15th, 16th, 17th of April. There was a reported gunfight in the palace. There were reportedly 30 army officers who were arrested. This is citing Russian and Iranian Fars news agency sources. The Royal Guard got into some firefights with other military units. And this is a little bit like the politics, say, if you think about the Decembrist revolt in Russia after Napoleon, right, about 1820. What the form that this is going to take in a society like this is that you're going to have the current monarch, who is the status quo, and then a cadet, right, a younger member of the royal family who becomes the focus of the forces of reform. And so it seems to be. The current actual Emir Thani of Qatar is getting on in years and apparently has health problems. There's a brother of that same ruler who has been exiled in France, and this person seems to be the focus, the candidate, if you will, of the dissenting faction to take over. So there was also a statement put out at that point by 66 opposition figures, including 16 members of the Qatar royal family. And especially controversial is the wife of the current top ruler of Qatar. That's Sheikha Moalem bint Nasser Al Misrad. She's widely criticized for various reasons. So this is a powder keg waiting to explode. Back in a minute on World Crisis Radio. Welcome back to World Crisis Radio. We're just going through the catalog of feudal reactionary relics of barbarism in the Gulf. The House of Saud, Saudi Arabia, the Khalifas of Bahrain, the Thanis of Qatar, United Arab Emirates, of course, is a congeries of all kinds of even smaller units, and this again looks very much like the Holy Roman Empire, even before the time of Luther. I mean, this is positively medieval. This is from the 1400s on the European scale, so they're 500 or 600 years behind the wheel of history. The feudal congeries. That's what the United Arab Emirates are. And then, of course, Oman, the Qaboos operation, Sultan Qaboos of Oman, last but not least, as we always say. And then you've got the Hashemite Kingdom of Jordan, and then you've got Morocco. So you've got, 7 or 8 monarchies, depending on how many of those UAEs you want to count. These are, in many ways, the most backward political systems in the world. These are the most backward societies in the world because impulses for reform are systematically crushed by the ruling families. Now, what should happen? Well, using the example of the Arab Spring, right? The Arab Spring started in the wrong places. The Arab Spring was obviously engineered by the Western intelligence agencies, starting with Julian Assange, then going on to the National Endowment for Democracy, Atpor, the CIA agency, and then the Albert Einstein Institute with Gene Sharp and all these people. Start in the wrong place. Don't start with the secular the secular societies of Arab socialism, the people who represent the current what's left of Nasserism currently. Better to start with these relics of feudal barbarism, which are these monarchies. Now, the time for this may now be here. We may now be within sight of a wave, first of all, of mass upsurges, very active forms of unprecedented social ferment, protests, and so forth, in the places that we're talking about. Once again, Saudi Arabia, Bahrain, Qatar, United Arab Emirates, Oman, Jordan, Morocco. These reactionary states are the basis of NATO and Israeli policies in the region, and to dispense with these monarchies would be a profound contribution to social and cultural progress in the world, and those would be real revolutions. Remember, the typology of revolution is if you want to get classified as a revolution, you've got to accomplish something of permanent institutional change: the overthrow of a monarchy, the abolition of slavery, the institution of a land reform, profound economic reforms, I think, can also do the job, where essentially one class is kicked out from controlling the government, say, as in the case of the New Deal. Bankers, which had totally controlled the U.S. society in the 1920s, are ousted to some degree from their power, and they're made at least to coexist with alternative power centers in the Roosevelt coalition and in the labor movement. Above all, by this measure, the French Revolution of 1789 is a real revolution. It overthrew a monarchy, whatever else they did. The Russian revolutions of 1917, that's a real revolution. The Chinese Revolution of 1910, the overthrow of the imperial house, also a revolution. And we can go through the typology. The U.S. has actually had three. 1776 is and I should have added this before, the ending of a foreign protectorate, or the ending of a foreign colonial status, and indeed then ousting a monarchy. So in this case, the ending of a foreign protectorate, which included subjugation to a monarchy. That's number one. Number two is the American Civil War of 1861 to 1865, which gets you the abolition of slavery and a land reform for most of the country in the form of the Homestead Act. Unfortunately, not a land reform for the places, the former Confederate States of America, that needed it most. And that failing is why we have this mass of reactionary opinion centered in those former Confederate states. And then I would also argue the New Deal, 1933 to 1945, or even to 1968, that's also a revolution in the sense that it, at least for quite a number of decades, pushes back, mitigates, cuts the power of the bankers over the society. So if you want to accomplish something, it can't be the overthrow of Ben Ali. I'm sorry, it's not enough. The overthrow of Mubarak, this is no revolution. The overthrow of Gaddafi, that's counter-revolution, right, given what you've got now. And, of course, counter-revolution, from a historical sense, is on the march in Syria. But in these reactionary monarchies, this would now be very, very different. So any overthrow of a monarchy immediately gets you on the world historical scoreboard as revolutionary. So, what about the moment? Here we have a very interesting meeting in Beirut. No, I'm sorry. This is actually in Iran. The dispatch comes from Beirut. So here we are in Iran. The Syrian foreign minister, Moallem, met with the Iranian foreign minister, Ali Akbar Salehi. And Salehi issued a warning to the Sunni-led Arab states and Turkey. In other words, he doesn't mention them by name, but the people who are attacking Syria, that their insistence on toppling the Syrian regime will destabilize their own countries and the entire region. Now, here's an interesting quote. Iranian Foreign Minister Salehi, at a press conference with his Syrian colleague Walid Muallim in Tehran this past Sunday. So we're talking Sunday, the 29th of July. This may be a date to remember. So this is 11 days after the terrorist attack on the Syrian government, right? The attempted decapitation, the unleashing of Operation Damascus Volcano. Salehi says, quote, if they, now they is these governments attacking Syria. So once again, quote, if they continue moving in the wrong direction, then let them rest assured that the consequences of this will affect them too, said Salehi at the joint news conference. Salehi says these countries are wrong, naive, and deluded if they think that the removal of Assad will bring a new government in Syria friendly to their interests. So he's saying that the forces favorable to an independent Syria will fight on no matter what happens to any individual. Muallim then added, we have sufficient defense capabilities to protect every sand grain in the homeland Syria, and what he's dealing with is a foreign-led conspiracy. So look at this. A warning directed to Saudi Arabia, Qatar, Turkey, and others, saying, you will face blowback. Blowback will be the word. This will boomerang. This will explode in your face. Stop your meddling while there's still time. Now, we've just mentioned the attempted coup in Qatar in April, the continuing upsurge in Bahrain, showing great courage. And remember, these people are not getting any help from the National Endowment for Democracy or the Albert Einstein people. Again, this is authentic revolution, so time to draw some conclusions. We'll be back in a minute here on World Crisis Radio. Welcome back to World Crisis Radio. Keep up with everything at tarpley.net, tarpley.net. If you didn't get a copy of George H.W. Bush, the unauthorized biography, in the month of July, you should remedy that immediately. Buy a copy of George Bush, the unauthorized biography from 1992. We're just marking the 20th anniversary of that landmark book, which established for all time the idea that the Bush family, with Prescott Bush, the grandfather of the more recent President Bush, these people were heavily involved in supporting the seizure of power by Hitler. That was Prescott Bush. So that's July 1992 to July 2012. Now we're in August. We got the fourth anniversary of Barack H. Obama, the unauthorized biography, and that is the one that basically tells you everything that Obama has done since, and his typical method of deception, dissembling, fakery, lying, right? Not the open bring it on of Bush, but something much more surreptitious. And we see that, right, that Obama pretends to lead from behind. Everybody knows the heart and soul, the nerve and fist of the attack on Syria is the CIA, the U.S. Special Forces, the U.S. Fleet, and Incirlik Air Base, dominated by the U.S. Air Force in Turkey. There you have it. So all of that is cataloged there. So now, if you didn't get it before, get it now, because it's the election time, right? You've got to know about Obama. We'll find ways to let you know about Romney too. So again, the big news: this idea that the Arab Spring, the fake Arab Spring, right? The completely demagogic color revolutions backed up by military force, that this could turn into something real when it gets to the House of Saud, the House of Thani, the House of Khalifa, the House of Qaboos, and the Hashemites, and the counterparts over there in Morocco, at least in some of these places, this apparently is realistic. Now, remember, reality of the Middle East is there are two kinds of networks, right? There are the Saudi Arabian Muslim Brotherhood networks, which are allied with the CIA. There it is. On the other side, the Iranians, who are, I think, almost automatically the friends of people who are nationalistic and so forth. Now, there were problems with supporting these color revolutions when they started, right? People who needed to already stop this in Libya didn't do it, and there's a long list of places. We don't need to go through all the people who didn't act in regard to Libya when they should have. But now it is Syria, and this is what it is. Now, the other thing, this morning on the Diane Rehm show, National Public Radio, National Pentagon Radio, we had a caller calling in saying that he'd been reading the Aspen Times of Aspen, Colorado, and that there was an article in there this past week about one of the famous residents of Aspen, Colorado, and that's Prince Bandar of Saudi Arabia, right? The main political operative of the House of Saud, right? The one who, hasn't sunk into the lethargy of the harem and the gambling and the inherent corruption of this rather strange family. But Bandar, right? Bandar Bush, ambassador of Saudi Arabia to the United States from 1983 to 2005, named head of Saudi intelligence during that week of July 18th when the bomb attack in Syria went off, killing the defense minister, the crisis management chief, and a couple of intelligence officials and generals. That was the attempted decapitation, which has not functioned. But the Aspen Times was the starting point for this question that the report is that Bandar has been killed. And this we had this already, I believe, last week. This comes, I believe, the first source is Réseau Voltaire of Thierry Maison. We also have it from Debka on the Israeli side. Now it's in the Aspen Times, and it's unconfirmed. And this question was answered then by David Ignatius, the resident State Department speaking tube at the Washington Post, resident State Department stenographer at the Washington Post, saying, he points out that Press TV of Iran had the story this past Monday, so Monday of this week, that Bandar had been assassinated, but not confirmed. Well, time will tell, but certainly there is no doubt that there was a bomb attack on the headquarters of Saudi intelligence, and that took place 4 days, I believe. It was on the 22nd or the 23rd. That was a bomb attack, and that attack, it is fairly widely acknowledged by a number of sources. In that one, the deputy to Bandar's right-hand man, if you will, was killed in that attack. So, as I think we raised the issue last week, does this now mean a more organized attempt for regime change in Saudi Arabia? Regime change in Saudi Arabia would, I think, have obvious world historical implications. And since this whole area is so sensitive, regime change in any of these places, be it Kuwait, Bahrain, Qatar, United Arab Emirates, Oman, Saudi Arabia, or indeed Jordan and Morocco, regime change in any of those places will automatically put regime change in all of them on the world historical agenda. So here's what people have to consider now. We cannot even imagine that the State Department, the National Endowment for Democracy, the Albert Einstein Institute, UTPOR, is going to do anything to try to actually promote democracy in these places that really need it, where democracy, any kind of democracy, would be a step forward, whatever the problems might be. These monarchical forms are objectively, historically obsolete. They have to go. There's no place in the 21st century for feudal monarchies, right? This stuff should have ended centuries ago. It didn't. It represents an important unfinished task for humanity. Therefore, what can one do? Well, there are the famous social media, and I've mentioned before. If you listen to the reactionary parrot Sean Hannity, he wants a Twitter army to, in his case, to go out and oppose Obama in favor of Romney. Don't waste your time with this. Rather, think about what you can do that's world historical. Now, if you have a computer, getting on Twitter is free. It can be done in 5 minutes. I've urged you to do it before. Now, more than ever, get yourself on Twitter and make yourself a resolution that you're going to put out whatever you can manage, 1, 5, 10 tweets per day when you can, because you can't do this every day. I don't think anybody can. But to maximize the amount of input in the direction that I'm talking about, that feudal monarchy, if we look around, right, feudal monarchy takes priority in overthrow compared to progressive, or at least Arab socialist or neo-Nasserist governments that have some positive features. Certainly with the Saudi royal family, there are no positive features from any point of view of the progress of human civilizations. This is all very basic stuff. You can make the arguments about the position of women in Saudi Arabia or these other places. It's worse than any place else in the world. Nobody else comes close in terms of barbarism, right? Punishments, the denial of free speech, right? Lèse-majesté, capital crime in all of these places. They are absolute monarchies. Think about what that means. The monarchies you see in Europe are, without exception, constitutional monarchies, and they've been watered down a lot. And the absolute ones, this means the Ancien Régime. It means something that you had in France up to 1789. In England, you had it up to 1688, maybe. But in these other places we're talking about, absolute monarchy is alive and well. This must come to an end. We'll be back in a minute on World Crisis Radio. Welcome back to World Crisis Radio. Webster Tarpley in Washington, D.C. Remember, tarpley.net. Always new items posted there. We will shortly have my speech at the New World Fair, held at the Unisphere there on the World's Fairgrounds, Flushing Meadow, Queens, 2 weeks ago, almost now. That will be up there soon. That's a kind of a programmatic and strategic statement that I tried to put together. I commend that to your attention. Now we'll talk about Romney in a minute, but let's in fitting Romney into the question of the world strategic situation. Here we have the Washington Post of today, Friday, August 3rd, and in here we've got Anne Applebaum. Now, Anne Applebaum's not just anybody. She's the wife of the Polish foreign minister, Sikorski. And here we can gauge something about how people on the receiving end of Romney's trip responded. We're told by David Ignatius this morning on National Pentagon Radio that when Romney talked in private to British Prime Minister Cameron, Romney sounded very dovish compared to the hawkish warmonger stance that he puts on in public. So the question, of course, is he's flip-flopping so many times, right? He's flipping back and forth. Does he know where his identity is, right? Are we dealing with an imposter in the sense of somebody with multiple personality disorder, multiple personality order, maybe? This I mention this because it's brought up in connection with Joseph Smith, the Mormon founder, the Mormon prophet that Romney claims to love, the founder of the doctrine that Romney says he loves his faith. Well, the faith is manufactured by Joseph Smith, who, according to some observers, has this multiple personality disorder and therefore had a couple of different personalities. Maybe Romney has that. But in public, of course, he's a warmonger. Now, the interesting insight from Anne Applebaum is that what she's saying is that Romney, when he goes to these countries, he doesn't know them. He doesn't know Britain. He doesn't know the Israelis even. He doesn't know Poland. He plays to a mythological cliche how these places are seen by reactionary U.S. politicians. And it's a very crude and primitive cliche, right? That, the main thing is the British are your great friends, the Israelis are the great enemies of Iran and the Muslims, and the Poles, of course, are the great enemies of the Russians. So it's always self-interested, right? It's always, let's play these people against somebody or use them in some other way. So here's Anne Applebaum, very briefly. She says, in Britain and Poland, Romney appeared to think he was paying visits to allies who are deeply disappointed by Obama and who long for a return of American leadership in the form of a new George W. Bush, or even better, a new Ronald Reagan. He imagined he would find soulmates in the British conservatives, the Tories, but no. And in Poland, it was a speech all about the Cold War, John Paul II, Solidarność, Lech Wałęsa, the end of the Cold War, and so forth. But these are not the problems of Poland today. And that's what she points out, that Romney was wrong. These are great stories, but this is not what concerns these people. They're looking towards the future, as any politician would. So fundamentally out of touch, and showing that he's not really addressing the reality of these countries in any way. Now, concerning the economic moment in Europe, we just had this past week was the central banks on parade, the impotence of the central banks once again, underlining the urgency to end the system of privately owned central banks, privately controlled, privately owned central banks. These are about as obsolete as the House of Saud. They should go, and indeed, if one goes, maybe the other will too. There's a lot hanging on that House of Saud, and of course, a lot hanging on the Federal Reserve and the European Central Bank. In the case of Bernanke, it's easily said. Bernanke says that he stands ready to do things to reduce unemployment. Well, today unemployment ticked up to 8.3% on a job creation of 163,000 new hires. Bernanke is obviously throwing his weight into the scales in favor of Romney, because any other way, the Federal Reserve would be pumping out liquidity right now to get, as one of these accounts says, the Wall Street Journal, to goose the economy with a big liquidity injection that would help Obama in the November election. He'd start getting positive figures, at least for a couple of months, right? This would not be a recovery, let me stress, but it would be a momentary uptick that might be then usable for demagogic propaganda purposes. The fact that Bernanke is doing nothing all this year indicates what I've said. The ruling class wants Romney. They want Obama out. The complication occurs when you look at the ineptitude of Romney, the ineptitude, the stupidity of Romney, the repulsive personal qualities. This is so enormous that the support of the ruling class may not be enough, because the ruling class is not equipped with a magic wand. They can't just, go Shazam and you become president. You got to go out there and win an election, and it's a slog, and it takes a lot of money, and it takes a lot of qualities that Romney just doesn't seem to have. So we're getting the polls this week, Obama ahead in the swing states. The percentage of votes doesn't mean anything. It doesn't matter the margin that Romney has in Texas, of course, under the Electoral College. It's what matters is those 8 to 12 swing states that actually decide the election. So Bernanke, clearly, by doing nothing, and this is what Schumer was trying to tell him when he testified the week before. Schumer said to him, Mr. Chairman, unemployment remains high. Get to work. Get to work means give us a big liquidity infusion that will carry us over the sluice gate here. So that's Bernanke. Now, Draghi interesting case, right? Draghi has cut the interest rates during his time at the European Central Bank. He also put out $1.2 trillion worth of cheap credit, 1% credit to the banks earlier this year, but that obviously doesn't get you anywhere, has not created a recovery. 2 weeks ago, Draghi came out and said, "We will do whatever is needed." Here's the quote. "Within our mandate, the ECB is ready to do whatever it takes to preserve the euro." And then he added, "And by the way, it will be enough. Whatever it takes to preserve the euro, and believe me, it will be enough." Therefore, when Draghi appeared this week to make a policy statement, the markets, meaning the cabal of speculative parasites, limited in number, you can essentially go through that list. Maybe we should. The 16 banks that make up the Libor cartel. That's pretty much the ones that dominate the economic life of the planet at this point. They're the ones that Draghi plays to. So these 16 banks were waiting for Draghi to announce something, and he didn't. There was no immediate action. So Draghi dashes the hopes of the markets for imminent action. We read in the Wall Street Journal of this morning, Friday, August 3rd. So this puts the question back on the table. What should Europe do? Come back and I'll tell you on World Crisis Radio. Welcome back to World Crisis Radio. If you're interested in who dominates the financial life of the planet and therefore the economic life under the current situation, look at that Libor cartel, right? Who are the banks that took part in the Libor fixing in more ways than one? That would be Barclays Bank of Great Britain, Royal Bank of Scotland, largely owned by the British government, HSBC, that's Hong Kong Shanghai Banking Corporation. They have been involved in drug money laundering since the time, well, it goes back decades and decades, if not a century. That's who laundered the money for the drug traffic through the British Crown colony of Hong Kong. And they obviously up to their necks now. The Mexican branch of HSBC, acting through the Cayman Islands dollar accounts, laundered billions and billions for Mexican drug cartels, Saudi banks linked to Al-Qaeda, and other criminal enterprises across the world. So again, Barclays Bank, Royal Bank of Scotland, number 2, HSBC, number 3, Lloyds Bank, number 4. Now, Lloyds Bank has absorbed HBOS during some of the fixing of Libor in 07, 08, and even into 09. HBOS was actually on this committee. That would be Halifax Bank of Scotland, I think, based in West Yorkshire. But that has now been absorbed, merged with Lloyds Bank. So Lloyds Bank, TSB, Bank of America, Citigroup, JP Morgan Chase, UBS, the old Union Bank of Switzerland, Credit Suisse, Deutsche Bank, Westdeutsche Landesbank, used to be Giro Centrale, Société Générale of France, Bank of Tokyo Mitsubishi UJF, Norin Chukin of Japan, Royal Bank of Canada, Rabobank of the Netherlands. That's the cartel. That's who's too big to fail. Those are the ones involved in the fixing of Libor, doctoring the interest rate on 1 quadrillion of toxic derivatives, credit default swaps, currency swaps across the world. So that's who Draghi is playing to, but he decided to punt this week. Now, the question has arisen on France 24, France 24 today. What tools are still in the central bank toolbox? Well, obviously central bank should become a national bank for the U.S. or a European bank for Europe. But the tools, let's remind ourselves what the tools are. The main tool is a credit stimulus. not just spewing money out as a monetary stimulus, but a targeted credit stimulus. And it means those famous terror tranches, the tranches of €1 trillion credit, with the goal being infrastructure creation to create 30 million plus jobs in the United States, 40 million plus jobs in the European Union and adjoining areas. It is the Lautenbach-Voitinsky approach, credit stimulus. Lautenbach, the right-winger of the German finance ministry, Voitinsky, the left-wing, actually Russian Menshevik, working for the German trade unions. They both converged in 31-32 on the idea of forcing the central bank to act like a national bank, issue billions of marks in those days, trillions of euros and dollars today, credit creation for national infrastructure and job creation. That's the tool you have. And it doesn't have to be money on the budget. By definition, it's European lending, not European borrowing and spending. It's the European Central Bank that needs to lend. Now, obviously, on the way to this, the European Central Bank is even more dysfunctional than the U.S. Federal Reserve, because the European Central Bank, according to this idiotic neoliberal mandate, they're even discouraged, let's say, from doing open market operations. You need to do open market operations. You've got to maintain those Spanish and Italian and other bonds. You should have been doing that for the last 2.5 years. This whole crisis had no reason to exist except some ideological lunacy, which, of course, is cultivated because it promotes somebody's specific moneyed interest. But Schäuble, I'm afraid Schäuble, time for him to go. He's outlived his positive historical role. He's basically sabotaging. Because apparently after Draghi said that he would do whatever is necessary, and believe me, it'll be enough, Schäuble leaned on him, and that's the result we get. Anyway, this is a minor side. The big thing is to unleash the inherent credit-creating power of the European Central Bank. The German taxpayer will not have to pay anything. The whole point of central banks, national banks, is yes, they can manufacture credit out of nothing, because behind them stands the power of the nation. We're dealing with political economy. Money is not metaphysically real. It is a fiction. It does not derive from precious metals. First comes credit, then comes money, historically as well as in practice today. So use the inherent credit-creating power of a European Central Bank or Federal Reserve to issue these terror tranches, trillion dollar tranches of credit, and you put out a tender offer in Europe to the countries, in the United States to the states, and say, come forward with your infrastructure plans, and come forward with the millions and millions of new productive jobs with union pay scales under the Davis-Bacon Act that will be created. Example, Villaraigosa of Los Angeles is not able to build 8 subway lines across the Los Angeles basin. They've got a dedicated tax revenue source to build them, but of course that's strung out over a long time, so they would need to get lump sum of cash up front. And he went to the federal government. The federal government has no infrastructure bank and therefore cannot lend money based on assignment of future revenues. Well, you don't need an infrastructure bank. You need a national bank that will create that credit using the inherent ability of the national state to create credit. And you don't need to have anybody, you can use that tax money for something else. And again, 100-year bonds, century bonds. Caltech, great institution, has taken the lead with century bonds. They know what they're doing, those people at Caltech. Century bonds, so it means you're going to have a 0% interest rate, 100-year maturity. You're going to pay those upfront costs back over a century at the rate of 1% a year. You do that, you will get a recovery, and This is the royal road to solving the economic problems of the world. Back in a minute. Welcome back to World Crisis Radio. Just one other insight into this current situation. We have Knight Capital, K-N-I-G-H-T. Knight Capital Group registered a $440 million loss from a computer trading glitch, allegedly. It's bankrupt. It's looking for a buyer or a cash infusion. It includes, the customers include Vanguard Mutual Funds, TD Ameritrade. This is a trading firm, Knight Capital. They say they installed new computer stuff. This is exactly what should not happen. Institute the Wall Street sales tax. These kinds of things will seldom happen because the level of constant computer-driven program trading, flash trading, computerized trading speculation will go down. It'll go down markedly. As it is right now, here's a $500 million hole blown into that one. Naturally, the London whale is still growing in the account books of J.P. Morgan Chase. Facebook continues to fall. It's lost half of its value. But let's get back to this infrastructure question. Let's look at the U.S. electrical grid. Now, the issue came up this week because of India, right? India had half of its population, about 600, according to some, even 700 million people, 1/10 of the world's population, by some counts, were in the dark. 1 out of 10 people on this planet because of a breakdown in the Indian power grid. Now, we'll wait and see what comes with that. But here, the Washington Post yesterday, decrepit U.S. power grid starts to splutter. Now, we had that here in Washington, D.C. The derecho, on June 29th, we had this unprecedented line of thunderstorms that blew through. One of the things it did was to bring down some towers in West Virginia, but we had some people with power out in the Washington, D.C. area for many days, including right here where I am. We're told that the U.S., it's a misnomer to call the U.S. power system a grid. It's not a grid. It's a patchwork quilt stitched together over a rapidly expanding nation. The U.S. grid is aging, stretched to capacity. It is the victim of decrepitude more than the forces of nature. It is beginning to falter. Experts feel failures that caused the blackouts in New York, Boston, and San Diego may just be the beginning. Now, let's just take a look at this. The story of the derecho is then just the starting point. By the way, with the derecho, the interesting debate here in the Washington area is, isn't it time to assume that civilization has come to North America to stay and that we ought to put these electrical lines underground? The cost of putting the lines underground, as they are in many places in Europe, it would cost about $6 billion to install underground power lines in the District of Columbia alone. $6 billion. This would add $226 to a monthly bill over 10 years. Don't do it that way. Get 0% Federal Reserve credit for infrastructure. This is the most essential kind of infrastructure you can imagine. Without electricity, there's nothing left. So here we go. The derecho hit 3 power lines in West Virginia. 70-mile-an-hour winds hit 3 towers in a row north of Route 50 near Ellenboro, West Virginia. These 3 lines went down, and this caused a power outage for many parts of the Mid-Atlantic. The 4th tower did not come down, but it was shaken. Right, it was the integrity was compromised. So these are 40-year-old towers collapsing in a freak storm. A lot of citations in this article from the American Society of Civil Engineers. These people need to be at the center of our attention. In July, parts of Manhattan experienced a brownout. Consolidated Edison had to reduce voltage to repair equipment. Texas and Southern California are considered vulnerable. A large part of downtown Boston lost power in March when the connection between a power line and a transformer failed, with sparks and a fire in the mineral oil that was being used as a coolant. Infrastructure is not being kept up, says the American Society of Civil Engineers. The fragility of the grid was also shown in Southern California last September. It started with attempted repairs in the Arizona desert near Yuma. There was some equipment that was regulating voltage flows that was malfunctioning. Something went wrong. A 500 kilovolt line stopped transmitting power. That caused an overload throughout the region. The entire thing is always on the brink, especially during the warmer months. September, still a warm month. So 11 minutes after the Yuma mistake, a nuclear power plant on the California coast, 200 miles away, shut down, and we then had several million people deprived of electric power from San Diego into northern Mexico. Schools closed, planes grounded, traffic lights dark, gridlock. Same thing we had here during the derecho. Pumps failed at water treatment plants. Raw sewage flowed into San Diego Bay. It was a cascading and uncontrolled shutdown, the most extensive power outage in California history. In the northeastern states in 2003, in the summer also, we had 50 million people from New York City into Canada and as far west as Ohio. That did not hit Washington, D.C., but places a little bit north, including parts of Pennsylvania, were in the dark. The reason for this, according to one study, the primary utility did not recognize or understand the deteriorated situation of the system. Well, you get the idea. The grid needs a major overhaul. The estimate is simply to keep it in the existing state, $107 billion over the next 8 years. And again, you can sample the cost of putting the power lines underground, $6 billion for the District of Columbia alone. Now, where could we get the resources? Well, you have the resources. The resources are there in terms of labor, industrial potential. You need money, the political fiction, to mobilize the resources that you have and that you must have. So get those terror tranches going. Seize the Fed. Take over the Federal Reserve. It could be done with a phone call. Obviously, Obama is such a weakling. He can't even call them up and say, pump in some cash and get me reelected. He's incapable of that. A real president would say, Ben, I got news for you. You're going to do a credit stimulus. You're going to put out a tender offer for $1 trillion of state bonds. The proviso is it's got to be infrastructure. It's got to be real, tangible, physical infrastructure, hard and soft. It's got to be roads, railroads, canals, water projects, electrical grids, electrical generation, public housing, public buildings, tangible, physical. And you'd start it, therefore, through construction. So that's how you would do it. Now, a couple of other notes. Well, I guess we'll get to these couple of other notes in the final segment here, and then we'll say something about Joseph Smith and the White Horse Prophecy once again. Back in a minute. Welcome back to World Crisis Radio. A couple of quick notes here. Washington Post of last Friday, July 27th, big article with map about Iran's buildup in the Gulf. Iran has increased ability to strike at the U.S. in the Gulf. The main issue here is swarming of large warships by many small ones, fast patrol boats, and so forth, plus mines, the mines that could be let loose, and the inadequate minesweeping of the U.S. forces. And then we have yesterday, Thursday, Washington Post. Yoda got his picture on the front page once again. Andrew Marshall. You want to know about Andrew Marshall? Read 9/11 Synthetic Terror Made in USA. This was Rumsfeld's futurologist. This is the so-called Office of Net Assessment. He's been there for 40 years. He's still there. He has now turned out a new war plan, a new utopian monstrosity, air-sea battle. A couple of years ago, it was air-land battle. Now we're into air-sea battle, and it's how do you deal with China? Well, U.S. stealth bombers would knock out China's long-range surveillance, radar, and precision missile systems located deep inside the country. An initial blinding campaign would be followed by a larger air and naval assault. This is pure insanity. This is Strangelove left over from the Wolfstetter clique. He's back in the days of Herman Kahn and Wolfstetter and Bernard Brody and all the rest of these crazy neocons, at that time called, I guess, Cold War Social Democrats, right-wing Social Democrats, Reformed Trotskyists. Naturally, this is increasing tensions with China, but this is what Obama is now executing, and we have interesting maps here in the Washington Post about what old Yoda, that's his nickname, has been recommending. So you got this going on. The death of Gore Vidal. Let me just say something about this. Gore Vidal had a home in Rome, Largo della Torre Argentina, and he also had a country house in Ravello down further south. I actually met Gore Vidal in 1978. I sold him a subscription to a magazine. He was a cheapskate. He wouldn't buy a year of the magazine. He only bought 3 months of it. And I clashed with him immediately because Gore Vidal is devoted to the tradition of Aaron Burr. He was a hater of Alexander Hamilton. He said Alexander Hamilton was British agent number 7. Absolutely ridiculous, absolutely delirious. He said Hamilton is a British agent. He also hated Franklin D. Roosevelt. The usual story, Franklin D. Roosevelt orchestrated Pearl Harbor. Again, delirium, reactionary nonsense. On 9/11, he was the exponent of blowback, right? You bomb them, they bomb you. You oppress them, they strike back at you. He put himself in the tradition of Petronius, Juvenal, the Roman satirist, and Apuleius. This is not a good tradition. The only moment, since we have De Mortuis Nihil Nisi Bonum, or something like that, the moment when Gore Vidal called William F. Buckley a crypto-Nazi, that was fine. But unfortunately, this is outweighed by these other problems that he had. Now, let's say something about Romney in terms of his tradition. Right? We've talked about the White Horse prophecy, that Mormonism is not just a religion, it's a political faction. Yesterday, people might have been interested on the LMN network, the interesting movie, The 19th Wife. The 19th Wife, based on the novel of the same name. This is not without merit, not without shining some light on certain interesting things. It's a parallel between events in the modern time with plural marriage, polygamy, spiritual wives, and all this, constantly interspersed with flashbacks to Brigham Young and to the very important book by Anne Eliza Young, that is to say, the former polygamous wife of Brigham Young, who went around the country and the world, I guess, to some extent, lecturing on the horrors of these seraglios, the harems, the serai of Brigham Young and so forth, and what a monster Brigham Young was, a hardened traitor. Naming a university after that guy is strange indeed. But now let's go back. We're going back before Brigham Young. Of course, we have the prophet Joseph Smith, the White Horse prophecy. What do we have? This is from an account of a prophecy issued in May of 1843 in Nauvoo, Illinois, at that time the Mormon center, and the prophecy issued by Joseph Smith goes like this: I want to tell you something of the future. I will speak in a parable like unto John the Revelator, St. John the Divine. You will go, you, the Mormon people, you will go into the Rocky Mountains, and you will become a great people out there in the Rocky Mountains. Now, hang on, let me just find this again. You will go into the Rocky Mountains, you'll become a great people, but then a time of troubles will begin, and the prophecy then goes into quite a bit of detail. You start with the Mormons going to the Rocky Mountains. Here we go. We finally got it. Into the Rocky Mountains, you'll become a great and mighty people. You, he says, at that point, I will call you, the Mormon power beyond the Rocky Mountains, the white horse of peace and safety, the white horse. And Joseph Smith says, I'll never make it there. I'm like Moses, of course. The enemies will continue to follow you with persecutions and make obnoxious laws against you in Congress to destroy the white horse. But you will have a friend or two to defend you and throw out the worst parts of these laws. So you keep petitioning Congress and so forth. Now, then we get to the heart of the matter, right? We get to the famous moment of the crisis. Now, unfortunately, my document has given me a little bit of trouble here. You will see, this is the heart of the matter, you must continue to petition Congress all the time, but they will treat you like strangers and aliens, and they will not give you your rights, but will govern you with strangers and commissioners. You will see the Constitution of the United States almost destroyed. It will hang like a thread as fine as a silk fiber. And then Joseph Smith goes on, I love the Constitution. It was made by inspiration of God, and it will be preserved and saved by the efforts of the white horse, the Mormon power beyond the Rockies, and by the red horse, who will combine in its defense. Now, when you read on, you find the red horse is the redcoats. It's the British Empire. An absolutely fantastic thesis that somehow the Mormons, secessionists, under the leadership, let's say, of the traitor, the hardened traitor Brigham Young, and the fundamentally hostile British Empire, the Red Horse, are going to save the U.S. Constitution. Then he goes on, as usual, he's always interested in money digging, the gold that will be found in the mountains and all this other stuff. A terrible revolution will take place in America, and everybody will be killing everybody else. And in the middle of this, it's going to be the white horse and the red horse combining against the pale horse. The pale horse means the United States. So the Mormons and the British Empire will unite. The white horse and the red horse will unite against the pale horse, the government of the United States. And ultimately it will be resolved into a war against Russia. Now, needless to say, this entire map perfectly overlays the needs of British imperial policy around the world. It's absolutely keyed to what the British needed at the time. So stay tuned to Tarpley.net, Webster G. Tarpley Twitter feed. There will be more coming on Mitt Romney as the possible executor of the White Horse prophecy. And we'll see you next week on World Crisis Radio.